Callum Twomey is live in the studio, and who better to go through a preview for the draft? Cal, just having a look through your Phantom guide, which has been updated this week. Not the mock draft yet. That's set to drop, on
Saturday
night?
night. Saturday night.
Let's go through some of those names. We've spoken about the top end, but a lot of teams, Hawthorn in the mix and a really important draft for them. Geelong, what do they do? So Ruben Ginbey is an interesting name. Tell us about the Perth lad.
Yeah, I've been informed it's Ginbey, just so we know for future reference. I've had the tap on the shoulder. I was going with Ginbey too. I think Jack Ginnivan has probably made a few issues for Ruben Ginbey across this year, but it's Ruben Ginbey, and he is a gun. I'm a big fan of his. 189 centimetre mid and plays half back as well. Had a really, really good season. He's sort of started this year as a bit of a bolter, back at the pack, like wait and see how he goes, but just kept rising and rising. He's right in that top 10 mix. I think Hawthorn, I think Geelong, I think West Coast would love him if he got there to their pick 8, but that's going to be touch and go.
So where does Hawthorn go with their pick 6?
They've done so many interviews recently.
Have they?
So many interviews. I've used this joke before, but they do more interviews than Graham Norton. They just love it. They got their guys to come in and do extra 4th and 5th interviews over the weekend. Sam Mitchell takes a real hand and stranglehold of those sort of conversations as well, which I love that he's invested. I'm fascinated to see which way they go because Jai Clark is a top player for them. He's not different to what they've got. They've already got a few players at 182 centimetres. So they've sort of got some players like him, but his star quality. Ginbey is different. I think Bailey.
What's different about him?
He's taller.
Yep.
He's versatile. He's a bigger body inside their midfield. They picked up Josh Ward last year, who was 180 centimetres. So there's some options from Mateus Phillip, who if he got there would be different. Cam McKenzie is different. So I get the sense that one of the different players is going to be really hard for them to pass up. But yeah, big draft for them. They've got 4 or 5 picks, another one at 24 too, and they clearly, Kane, have been investing in the draft over a couple of years now. That's part of the strategy, clearly.
Oliver Hollands, he's an elite runner. I'm seeing you, an Ed Langdon style of play you've referenced.
Yeah, 5.54 over 2K, Kane.
That's moving.
Yeah, and he set himself for that run, and I think if he'd done it at the start of the day rather than at the end, he probably would have got another 4 or 5 seconds off it. So, yeah, he can move, and he's got the fitness base to step into an AFL team straight away. So the interest in him is going to be around that later stages of the top 10. Carlton, Bulldogs, West Coast, Melbourne, all those sort of clubs will have a look at him. The Swans, if he got there at pick 14. The Swans are interesting because they've got 14, 17. I think they're going to be open to trading one potentially if an opportunity opens up, and I think other clubs are aware of that too. The Giants have 4 picks, 3 of which are in the teens, 15, 18 and 19. So I think they're going to be pretty flexible with their trade hand too. So that's where some of those discussions that we spoke about before, Kane, might come into things if those players are tapped out. Maybe a club is willing to offer a future first-round pick to get back in and grab someone.
The Saints said they need more match winners. They got pick 9. Who should they look at?
I'm a fan of Cam McKenzie if he gets to that point. I've always rated him around the sort of 9-10 mark. I think if Elijah Sardis gets there, and it's probably more unlikely than likely, but if he got there, he'd be impossible really to pass up because of his star quality. And Mateus Phillipou as well, I think is going to be a star. He's young. He's 5 days off being in next year's draft. So he doesn't turn 18 until December 27 or something like that. So, recruiters, the great word is upside. There's a lot of that with him too.
Matt Jefferson, you've got at number 12. Now, he's a bit taller. Tell us about him. He's an All-Australian.
Yeah, and I remember you might have been a jingle on your show over the years, the Jefferson Ford, Gerard.
Yep.
Yeah, he's the grandson of
Is
that.
he?
Yeah. So I think he's got a fair amount of vehicles of his choice, no matter where.
Sponsorship.
Yeah, nearly. So he is a key forward, 195 centimetres, kicked a lot of goals this year. Set shot kicking is really accurate and smart. He's around that sort of Melbourne onwards type of mix.
Righto, now we all focus on the top 10 picks, top 20 picks. One of the great challenges for me is to pick the gems that are in the 2nd and 3rd round. I remember doing this exercise before Glenn Luff even became Glenn Luff. And he came in and I asked him who's going to be the smoky. This is the very first time. And he picked out a kid called Rory Sloane at pick 44 in the 2008 draft.
Yep.
Who's the Rory Sloane where they're all going to say he can't kick, and yet he's a super talent. Rory was captain of Eastern Districts. I think he was captain of Metropolitan, etc. Is there a Rory Sloane out there that everyone's going to ignore, and yet he's going to end up being a Dan Hanbury or a Luke Parker, taken in the 30s and become absolute A-grade guns?
There will be.
Yep.
There will be. There's a couple of guys that I'm fans of late who are on that sort of fringe of being picked or even a rookie potentially. There's a guy called Blake Jury who's a smaller type. He's a sort of Jack Higgins type of player.
Right.
I think that's someone that he'll come in and play that type of role, forward mid.
So they've got to become an All-Australian.
Got to become an All-Australian. Okay. What about? I'll give you one. What about Caleb Smith? He's everyone loves speed. Is not going out of fashion,
No,
is it?
I like that.
You got to have speed and pace, and he's done that in the back half of the year, the last 6 weeks of the season or something. Caleb with a K.
Caleb with a K.
From Western Australia.
Caleb
Smith. Yeah. So keep an eye on him.
Okay.
He is, I think, an option for clubs sort of 30 onwards. Been a little bit of a late season bolter.
Mm-hmm.
We use bolter a little bit
too
liberally, but I think that he is an option for a few clubs there. Just keep an eye on him. I'm not saying it's going to happen next year, maybe even not a year after that, but there's something there to work with. If you got speed, you got something in the game.
My favourite draft story, maybe not ever, but up there, is Tom Stewart. What are clubs doing to make sure these players don't get through now? Take me through the resources just so no one slips through the cracks.
Tom Stewart's an interesting one. He spoke a lot to the Cats in that draft year and not as much to a few other clubs, but he's an interesting story. He's almost like the pick everyone knew was going to happen, but no one picked him instead because they just...
Why though? What was it? Was there personal issues? There must have been red flags.
No red flags. I think they just he got in front of the Cats and it felt like it was a bit of a they had picked him off pretty early as
Wasn't
the
there
guy
a
for
Matthew
their
Scarlett
Matthew Scarlett
endorsement?
link? Yeah, Matthew Scarlett link. It's almost like he was he was on the radar from a fair way out that maybe other clubs didn't get the sense of him quite as much. Who's going to be that guy? Mature ages are tough because the mature age market's changed a fair bit, Kane, with the mid-season draft coming in. I think they generally get their opportunity there rather than this time around, and the rookie draft might be more of a chance for that. I'm always interested in the late talls. Like who's going to, as you said before, Gerard, who's going to bank on a tall late, knowing that you're not going to be picked or playing over the next couple of years? So there's a guy called Max Noble, who's Trent Noble's son. Mm-hmm. I think he'll be a really good ruckman, but it's going to be 4 years away at least until.
But that's all right if you use pick 45 or 50.
Well, that's what I mean, and he may be even a rookie selection, but he's 207 centimetres,
Right.
so it's so hard. If you can be half decent at that size, you're going to appeal to an AFL club because the clubs are going and sourcing basketballers and overseas talent and all these type of things to be the 205 to 10 centimetre player. You might have one there at Gippsland who's just got to be given time.
A few texts coming through, and we'll get through a couple of those before we let you go. This one, hi Cow, which clubs are showing the most interest in Joe Richardson and Hugh Davies?
Yeah, Hugh Davies, I think, will be a key defender who'll be on the radar of a few clubs after pick 30. I think he gets drafted national draft. West Coast are out of it there. Would Fremantle do? They've probably got their fair share of key backs at this point, but I think he gets picked after a pretty solid season. And Joe Richardson, again, bolter alert. He was the guy from Wangaratta. He's 22, turning 23, small forward. His highlights tape is electric. I think he might have even half made it himself just to make sure that it got out there, and it's worked because all the clubs have been out to Wangaratta and seen him play. There's GWS, Collingwood's been linked to him. Geelong late if he got there. I'm not sure he does now though. So yeah, I think he's going to be picked as a player who sort of the diamond in the rough a little bit about 6 weeks ago, but every club sort of cottoned on. He was a late call up to the state draft combine. So at that point that a few clubs are looking at him. No one wants to put their hand in the air and say, come along to the combine to sort of give away their hand. But he's going to be picked.
Jared, one from Ben from Essendon. He's a mad Cats fan. If Clark's still on the board at their pick, do they just pick him, or will there be a discussion to be had?
I think there's a discussion to be had if Ruben Jimby's there and also if Cam McKenzie's there. I don't think it's just a certainty that they draft Jai Clark just because he's a local.
If there was two players almost exactly the same, except for height difference, would the height always win out?
It'd be a big factor. And Geelong hasn't been afraid of drafting West Australians over the years. How many have gone back? Tim Kelly did, but that was a slightly different scenario and case. But they've been able to do it. Mitch Duncan, Harry Taylor, they've picked up some pretty good ones over the years. from WA, and he's from Dunsborough as well. So if he was ever going to play AFL, he was always going to have to move.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of how far. Is it 3 hours up the road, or is it 3 hours and then a 4 or 3 hour plane trip after that? So height is a major factor, though. And you talk about height difference there. Jai Clark's 181 centimetres, Jimby's 189. So there's a difference in what you can do around the field.
Just having a look at the Swans draft picks of 2021, Angus Sheldrick, Matthew Roberts, Corey Warner, Lachlan Rankin were their top 4. I mean, Sheldrick had a couple of games, but essentially they've just been put into the old Hawthorn system where you've got to play 100 seconds games before you get picked. When clubs are going to the draft, are they thinking development, or are they thinking this guy can have an impact pretty much straight away with most of their picks?
They started a bit later, didn't they? I think if you're drafting the first 15, I'll put it this way: I reckon senior coaches would want their top 15 players to be playing some senior footy straight away, and expecting that you can be a difference maker straight away. But Sheldrick was later first round, and then after that, I think a few of those guys were pretty deep into it. So and a good team. So opportunities might have been difficult. And as you say, Sheldrick started pretty hot, had a really good pre-season, and probably faded a little bit on the weight of a long year.
Who do you think will be called one?
I think it's most likely to be the man that was sitting in the chair just before me.
Why wouldn't they tell him already? Is it problematic for him to be told?
No, not problematic. I think that sometimes clubs just leave it a little bit. They've got a decision to make on the bid.
Yep.
I don't think they have a decision to make on the player. And there's a lot of factors to the bid. Does he want the pressure? Does he not? Does this being in Sydney be a factor compared to other number ones? I think it is. I think there's a very big difference to the number one scrutiny that the Giants number ones over the years have faced compared to even what Jason Horne-Francis faced in 1 year at North Melbourne this year. So that's a factor. One, does he care? Like Jason Horne-Francis really wanted being number one pick last year. Now that it's become more of a reality, I think Aaron Cabin probably think, well, if you're going to be number 2, you may as well be number 1.
Didn't seem to phase him too much to me.
I don't think too much phases Aaron.
Will we read in